I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
Mr. O'Neill,
All right.
Listen, stop.
All right.
Listen to me.
I'm not
You're not going to raise your voice again.
In a
I'm
small
not gonna raise
neighborhood
my
in
voice.
Riverview, Florida, a shocking incident occurred that tore a family apart. A father stood in court and confessed, "I don't regret killing my family." His words left everyone in the court shocked, even the judges. Judge Sisko, visibly moved, said this was the worst case I've ever seen. What drives a man to commit such brutal acts? And how did his young son survive the horrible incident and even testify against him? Ronnie O'Neill was born in Florida and grew up facing many challenges. His early life was family issues and emotional instability, and these are the factors that would define his adult years. As a young man, he attended local schools in the area, where friends remembered him as someone who struggled to connect with others. It wasn't easy for him at all, and the path he would follow seemed to be set by the personal demons he never fully confronted. On the other hand, Kenyatta Barron came from a different background. Born in the same state, she was known for her warm smile and caring nature. Kenyatta grew up in a tight-knit community and attended schools where she excelled academically. Despite facing challenges in her early life, she was determined to create a better future for herself and her children. Friends recalled her love for family activities and her ability to always be there for others, making her a bright and compassionate figure to everyone who knew her. Before they met, Kenyatta had already established herself as a strong, independent woman, working hard to build a stable life. Ronnie, however, was still figuring out his place in the world, often wrestling with feelings of anger and frustration. It wasn't long before their paths crossed, and they began a relationship that would take unexpected turns. In the beginning, Kenyatta saw potential in Ronnie and hoped that he could change, but the relationship kept getting worse. Their shared interests seemed to draw them together at first. Ronnie enjoyed outdoor activities and sports, while Kenyatta found peace in music and spending time with her children. But as time went on, they began to have misunderstandings. Ronnie always has anger issues. He got angry for every little thing and started to wear on Kenyatta, who was doing her best to balance family life and her role as a mother. Even with their differences, they continued to stay together, not knowing that the destructive forces at play would soon tear them apart.
What's your emergency?
I'm shot. Help me. I'm shot. Help me, please. Jesus, help me. I'm shot.
Okay, what's the address of the emergency, ma'am? What's the address of your
I'm
emergency?
shot. Help me, please.
What's your address? What's your
My
address,
boyfriend
ma'am?
shot me. Help me, please.
Before the
More
tragic
compelling
night of
testimony.
March 18, 2018, he experienced many issues from his childhood. These early struggles left deep scars, and as he grew older, Ronnie found it difficult to manage his emotions and control his anger. His relationships were strained, and his mental health continued to deteriorate. As an adult, Ronnie's behavior became increasingly erratic. He had difficulty holding down steady employment, and his relationships were often troubled, particularly with women. His relationship with Kenyatta Barron, the mother of his children, was no exception. At first, their connection seemed like it could work. Kenyatta, a warm, loving woman, saw potential in Ronnie, despite his flaws. But over time, the tension in their relationship became undeniable. Ronnie's anger grew, and Kenyatta, concerned for the safety of her children, found herself trapped in a relationship she no longer knew how to escape. Their constant arguing, Ronnie's unpredictable behavior, and his temper wore her down. Kenyatta, though, was determined to protect her children. In the months before the crime, she started making plans to separate from Ronnie. She wanted to keep her children safe and to provide them with a better life, free from the chaos that had become their daily reality. But she had no idea how deep the danger was. She couldn't have known that Ronnie would react to her decision with violence that would change their lives forever. In the late hours of March 18, 2018, tensions between Ronnie and Kenyatta reached a boiling point. Ronnie, in a rage, shot Kenyatta. The blast of the shotgun tore through their home, and with it any semblance of safety or hope for the future. Kenyatta's last moments were filled with terror and desperation as she realized the man she once loved had become a monster. She tried to fight back, but it was too late. Her pleas for help, but no near to help.
What's your emergency?
I'm shot. Help me. I'm shot. Help me, please. Jesus, help me. I'm shot.
Okay, what's the address of the emergency, ma'am? What's the address of your
I'm
emergency?
shot. Help me, please.
What's your address? What's your
My
address,
boyfriend
ma'am?
shot me. Help me, please.
Kenyatta's 911 call was frantic, full of fear as she gasped for breath, her voice shaking as she pleaded for help. "Please, please help us," she cried, her voice barely audible over the panic. She begged the operator to send help immediately, but she couldn't stop what had already begun. But Ronnie wasn't done yet. After shooting Kenyatta, he turned on his 9-year-old daughter, Ronavia. With a hatchet, he struck her repeatedly. Ronavia, born with disabilities, had no ability to defend herself. She couldn't scream for help or run to safety. She was helpless against the brutality of her father's attack. As she lay there, unaware of how to escape, she must have known she was next. Ronnie then turned on his 8-year-old son, Ronnie 4, with a knife. He tried to finish the job, stabbing his own son. But despite the severe injuries, Ronnie 4 fought for his life. With incredible courage, he managed to escape, running from the nightmare that had unfolded inside his own home. Covered in blood, he somehow found a way to survive. In one last act of cruelty, Ronnie set fire to the house, hoping to destroy the evidence of his horrific crimes. The flames began to spread through the home, but it was too late to erase what had already happened. When the police arrived, the scene was beyond anything they had expected. The house was on fire, and inside, the devastation was overwhelming. Kenyatta Barron was dead, and so was her daughter, Ronavia. Ronnie IV was rushed to the hospital, severely injured but still alive, his testimony now vital in the investigation.
I am not sorry for something.
Detectives quickly began piecing together the horrifying details of the crime, but it was the words of Ronnie IV that would forever alter the course of the case. When asked what had happened, the young boy, his voice steady despite the trauma, looked at the detectives and said, "My father shot my mother." His statement, spoken with the clarity of a child who had just survived unspeakable horror, was the key that unlocked the truth of the night's events. The news of the crime spread quickly, and the community was left in shock. Neighbors and friends who had once seen Ronnie and Kenyatta as a family just trying to get by now had to come to terms with the unimaginable. How could this have happened? How could a father commit such brutal acts against his own family? The questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered, and full of pain. As the investigation unfolded, the emotional weight of the tragedy began to take its toll on everyone involved. Kenyatta Barron's family, particularly her mother, Carrie Lloyd, was devastated. In the wake of the murders, Carrie struggled to make sense of the loss. Her daughter, whom she had raised with love and care, was gone, taken in the most violent way imaginable. In an emotional statement to the court, Carrie described how Ronnie had stolen not only her daughter but also her precious granddaughter. Carrie spoke with a broken heart as she described Ronavia, a child who had faced so many challenges in her life. She couldn't talk, she couldn't defend herself, Carrie said through tears. And yet, she knew what was happening. She was betrayed in the worst possible way. Her grief was palpable, and her words became a lasting reminder of the deep, enduring pain caused by this tragedy. The community, too, was left in shock. Neighbors and friends who had known Ronnie and Kenyatta were horrified to learn what had happened. They had seen the couple struggle, but no one could have imagined the violence that would ultimately unfold. Many expressed disbelief, unable to reconcile the man they had known with the one who could commit such horrific acts. How could this happen? How could a father turn against his own family with such coldness? As the investigation continued, the community's grief turned to anger as they struggled to comprehend the unfathomable tragedy that had taken place in their own backyard. For those who knew the family, the loss felt deeply personal, and the questions continued to linger in the air.
For something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
Mr. O'Neill,
All right.
Listen, stop stop.
All right.
Listen to me.
I'm not
You're not going to raise your voice again.
I'm not going to raise my voice again.
again.
I'm not.
I will have you removed from this courtroom. I can sentence you without you being present.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't conduct
I
yourself.
understand, Your Honor.
Thank you.
But I will say, I'm sorry for your loss.
19 years I've been at this job. I've seen human beings killed at the hands of others in every way imaginable. You name it, I've seen it. Shootings, stabbings, drownings, suffocatings, blown apart by cars in DUI manslaughter cases. Horrible things. This is the worst case I have ever seen as far as the facts go.
As the sentencing phase unfolded, Kenyatta Barron's mother, Carrie Lloyd, took the stand to speak on behalf of her daughter and granddaughter. Her voice trembled as she recounted the life she had shared with Kenyatta, her love, her hopes for a future, and the dreams they had shared as mother and daughter. The pain of losing her daughter and granddaughter was unbearable, and Carrie's words echoed through the courtroom as she made her tearful plea for justice. Carrie spoke of the cruelty of Ronnie Waniel's actions, of the deep sense of betrayal that came from the man who was supposed to protect his family. "You took my angels from me," she said, her voice breaking with the weight of grief. "And now I'm left with nothing but the memory of them." Her statement, though filled with pain, was also a cry for justice, a plea for the court to understand the depth of her loss. Carrie's disappointment with the jury's decision was clear. She had hoped for the death penalty, hoping that it would bring a sense of closure to the pain she had endured. But the jury had opted for life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision that left Carrie feeling as though justice had not been fully served. The weight of her words lingered in the room as she took her seat, a reminder of the deep, irreversible damage caused by this act of violence.
But I will say, I'm sorry for your loss.
19 years I've been at this job. I've seen human beings killed at the hands of others in every way imaginable. You name it, I've seen it. Shootings, stabbings, drownings, suffocatings, blown apart by cars in DUI manslaughter cases. Horrible things. This is the worst case I have ever seen as far as the facts go.
The tension in the courtroom was thick as the moment of sentencing arrived. Judge Michelle Cisco, having witnessed the harrowing details of the case, was left with no illusions about the gravity of the crimes that had been committed. She stood, ready to deliver her judgment, her voice calm yet heavy with the weight of the decision before her. "This is the worst case I've ever seen," Judge Cisco declared, her words cutting through the courtroom. The brutality of Ronnie Waniel's actions, his complete disregard for the lives of his children and the mother of his children, had left a lasting impact on everyone involved in the case. Her statement was a reflection of the profound effect this case had on her and on all those who had witnessed the aftermath of the violence. As she spoke, there was a sense of finality in the air. The courtroom had been consumed by emotions of disbelief, anger, and sorrow for days, but now it was time for justice to be served. The sentence was read aloud. 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for the murders of Kenyatta Barron and Ronivia, and for the attempted murder of Ronnie IV. In addition, Ronnie Neal would serve 90 more years for arson and child abuse, charges that stemmed from the fire he had set in a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. The sentence was heavy, but for many it felt like a small measure of justice in the face of a crime that could never truly be undone. The families of the victims, the community, and even the survivors of the tragedy, especially Ronnie IV, would forever carry the scars of that night. But for the court, the decision was final. In the days following the verdict, the community was divided. For some, the sentence was a necessary step in ensuring that Ronnie I would never be able to harm anyone again. They felt the life sentence was a fitting end for someone who had committed such heinous acts. There was a sense of relief that at least he would be locked away for the rest of his life, unable to hurt anyone else. But for others, the sentence did not go far enough. There were many who believed that justice demanded more, Some felt the death penalty should have been applied given the brutal nature of the crime and the fact that it involved the murder of an innocent mother and child. The argument for the death penalty was strong, particularly from those who saw the crime as an unforgivable act of violence that deserved the ultimate punishment. The community's mixed emotions were a reflection of the complexity of the case. The loss was so deep, so tragic, that it left little room for clear answers. Many struggled to reconcile their feelings of grief with their desire for justice. But in the end, the court's decision was final, and Ronnie O'Neal would spend the rest of his life in prison. During the trial, a psychological evaluation was presented by the defense team. Ronnie O'Neal's lawyers argued that their client had been suffering from PTSD and a delusional disorder, which they claimed had contributed to his violent behavior. According to their expert testimony, the trauma of his past, including a near-death experience from a drive-by shooting months before the murders, had taken a toll on his mental health. While the testimony provided some insight into O'Neal's psychological state, it did little to excuse the horrific acts he had committed. The prosecution refuted these claims, pointing to the deliberate and premeditated nature of his actions. The jury ultimately sided with the prosecution, rejecting the defense's argument that O'Neal's mental state played a significant role in his decision to murder his family. In the end, no psychological condition could justify the extreme violence O'Neal had inflicted. His actions were a result of his own choices, and the court made it clear that he would be held fully accountable for the lives he had destroyed. As the dust settles and the courtroom doors close, the true weight of what transpired continues to haunt everyone involved. The trauma inflicted on Ronnie 101 IV, the surviving son, is unimaginable. No child should have to witness the violent deaths of his mother and sister, let alone at the hands of his own father. Ronnie 4 now faces a lifetime of emotional scars that will never fully heal. He must carry the burden of being the sole witness to his family's destruction, a young boy whose innocence was stolen in an instant. And then there's the family left behind. Kenyatta Barron's mother, Carrie Lloyd, will never stop grieving for her daughter and granddaughter. Every day she is reminded of the loss that can never be replaced. For those who knew them, the faces of Kenyatta and Ronivia will never fade, and the empty space left in their hearts will only grow larger with time. The loss is not just of life, but of the future. Future milestones, birthdays, and moments that will never come. This tragedy forces us to confront difficult questions about domestic violence, mental health, and the justice system. Ronnie O'Neal's history, marked by emotional turmoil and mental health struggles, was known to those around him, yet nothing could prevent the horrors he unleashed. Did society fail him? And more importantly, did it fail his victims? As we reflect on the justice system, we must ask ourselves, can we ever truly deliver justice when the damage is so immense? Can a sentence, no matter how severe, ever bring real closure to a family shattered by betrayal? How do we make sense of a tragedy so profound, one that leaves seasoned professionals struggling to find the right words? Can any amount of punishment ever be enough to heal the wounds of those left behind? These questions linger long after the case has been closed, leaving a haunting echo that we must all confront. And perhaps, in the face of such destruction, the most pressing question remains: can justice ever truly be served for such a betrayal? As we close, we turn to you, the viewer. What do you think of the jury's decision? Was the life sentence enough, or should Ronnie O'Neal have faced the death penalty? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice is an important part of this conversation. Let us know what you believe.